So guys, the first thing we're going to start off with is installing dynamips and dynagen, and we're just going to use the command sudo apt install dynamips dynagen. And on our Linux Mint 18, this is a package that will be installed once you run this command. The next thing we're going to do is create our folder called router, and we are also going to create our dynagen config file. Once we're done creating our config file, we'll move that to the router folder that we created earlier, and we're going to also create our R2 router, which is basically copying a section of our R1 config and pasting it in that same config file to create our R2. And once our R2 is created, we will copy our bin file for our router. This is basically our router iOS, and we're going to place it in that same folder that we created earlier, which is our router folder. Once that is done, we're just going to test our configs. We're going to start dynamips, dynagen, load our config file, and just start R1 and R2, make sure everything works. So guys, to get to our router, we'll just telnet and localhost and the port, which is 2521. That's what we set up for router 1. And we also made a change in the config for router 2. We had 2522 for router 2. So the interfaces you see, ENS 33, 34, those are because we're using VMware. However, if you're using VirtualBox, you will see different different interfaces. So what you could do is just make sure that you're creating your bridge to communicate with your network, which is your NAT or internal network. Once your bridge is up, you will see that BR0 and also that BR0:0, which is our alias. And we also went ahead and assigned an IP address, which is 192.168.5.10 to the host network. However, when we switched over to VirtualBox, which is at the end of this video, you'll see that the network host address was changed to 192.168.5.4. It still works, right? And in the router config files, you don't have to specify a gateway, but we did. So if you want, you can, but if there's no gateway specified, it will be fine as well. So guys, once your bridge file is configured for your bridge, you will have to install your bridge package, which is the command is sudo apt install bridge-utils And also you could add uml-utilities also, okay? And these are just the files you're going to need to make sure that your bridge is configured properly. And you also want to test your bridge just to make sure that you can communicate with your routers, and your routers can communicate with your host or VMs and vice versa, okay? We're going to start off by starting dynamips, and also we are going to load our config file. So it's dynagen dynagen.conf, and that will load our config file. We just want to make sure we're in the router folder. And then we're going to go ahead and start R1 and start R2. That's our routers there. And then we want to make sure that our bridge is up. So we're going to enter the command sudo brctl addif bro, which is our bridge interface, and tap1, which is the interface for our router. We just want to make sure that bridge is connected. And then tap2, which is the interface for the router 2. And then we're just going to make sure tap1 and tap2 is also up, and ensure that we can both ping the routers, and also that the routers can ping our VMs. So in this clip, we are going to install tftpd and tft package, and also create our xine or xinetd.tftp config file. And what are these is just to ensure that we correctly configure our tftp server, which is basically our host, our Linux 18 VM. And this tftp server will serve our CME file to our routers, and that's why we're doing this config. It's just going to act as a TFTP server to serve our files, the CME files, to the routers. We're gonna host these files in our folder that we created called tftp boot, and what we specified in our config file is that this folder is the folder that you should search for the cme.tar files, right? And then after that, we're just gonna extract those files using R1 and R2. So whenever we start up our routers, we also have our CME files loaded as well. Right, then we're just gonna make sure that we go on to R1 and extract our CME file, and the name for that is cme-config.tar. So that's the extraction command there, and we just want to specify our host machine so the router knows where to look for that file. Then we want to make sure that we have our two VMs, Windows VMs running, and we just want to make sure those are installed. And we also installed our Cisco IP Communicator. And once we're done with that, we're also going to create our cnf-files and create our ephones. So each router will be associated to one ephone. And very important, guys, is just IP source address is going to be our 192.168.5.4, but it's actually our router address. So we later changed this to 5.71 port 2000. And we also did the same exact thing on R2, and we specified a 192.168.5.18, which is our station number plus 1 for R2. And this enables us to log in to our GUI by specifying that IP address, and also at the end of it in the browser we just put a slash cme.html, and we're able to log into our browser, our GUI. And also we just went ahead and we added our DN for each phone, right? So for R1, there's only one phone registered to router 1, so it only showed one phone. And then we made sure we created extension number, which is 7871, right? And for R2, we did it through the GUI for R2, and we made sure we created that extension number, which is 7971, all right? And we also added our dial pairs, so the phones can call each other. Without the dial pairs, we would not be able to call each other if the phones are on separate routers, right? So we definitely need that. And once we created that, we were able to call phones, right? So we called 7871, and we assigned that to button 2, right? And also we are able to call our own phones, as you can see. Thank you.